Hi, happy Tuesday. Welcome to Power 30. Headlines today: Gerald Hines passes away at 95. Rent collections. Medical office leads the way. And office REITs face cash flow problems. Today's guest, Mandi Wedin, you're going to love her. We're going to talk Agile office. Really cool, really fun. Power 30 starts now. Gerald Hines, 95 years old, passes from this earth. Perhaps no one has shaped more skyline in America than Gerald Hines. The company that bears his name currently has a presence in 225 cities and 25 countries with an impressive $144.1 billion worth of assets under management. Well done, Mr. Hines. Looking at second quarter rent collections by Marcus and Millichap, you can see that medical office leads the way, somewhat surprising given that dentists, orthodontists, and other small practices were forced to close early in the pandemic. Office REITs have been hammered since COVID-19 hit. According to a quick analysis by Jackson Phillips at our REIT desk shows most office REITs are down in the pandemic, ranging from 20% to being off 40% or more. Are there opportunities to go long here, or is this representative of the actual post-COVID values? According to Globe Street, office REITs face higher cash flow risk from COVID-19. Fitch ratings for REITs have drifted south since the outbreak. Reduced ratings are primarily due to economic pressures on the office segment, plus a heightened concern about future demand. SL Green Realty's and Vornado Realty Trust BBB bond rating outlooks were revised to negative from stable, and McCallie Realty's rating was downgraded to BB negative from stable earlier this month. When we talk to Mandi Wedin in a minute, we'll find out if there are other forces offsetting some of the negatives for the office sector. And lastly, no office-focused Power 30 would be complete without discussing WeWork. I ran a quick search to find out the latest, and it was all over the board, as you can see here. But it looks like funding trouble has followed them into the pandemic and will cause them to contract, cancel, back out, and restructure and do all sorts of fun things to watch. But let's talk to our expert, Mandi, and find out where we are headed. I think we got it. I got through the news.
Good
Second
work.
week in a row. It did. Well, hi, Mandi. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. This is exciting. Welcome to the new show. I'm glad to have you. You were, I think, the first person I asked to be a guest. And I remember, I think we were doing was it a women in real estate session? And just loved the thoughts that you had and the way you approached that. But you mentioned later that you were talking about a concept of Agile office, and that really got my attention. So I thought Agile office, that's a term that's meant for software and hardware development. Agile is, and they've kind of hijacked that term. But so let's just start with, tell us a little bit about your background, what you're doing for your clients, and then break into Agile office for us.
Excellent. Thanks, Todd. So I have a consultancy called Feroce Real Estate Advisors, where I bring my real estate investment experience to help companies transform and grow their real estate businesses. It's challenging, it's fun, it's a lot of things to work on, many different things in the spectrum of real estate. Bottom line, I like puzzles, and right now real estate is a giant puzzle.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so Agile office. There used to be a term called flexible office, right? And in the last run up, we saw dirt systems. Am I getting that right? So you could sort of rearrange things, but we're coming out of an era where it used to be all private offices. And like the law firm deal, everybody wanted the corner office. As you moved your way up, you were in a cubicle, then you got to a window office, then you got to the corner office. What elements of Agile office does it take from what we used to do and what things are new?
Sure. So let's start with the base premise that real estate is a tool that companies use to achieve their business goals. And today, in our rapidly changing business environment, real estate needs to be able to change along with it. Now, this change was happening before COVID-19. And as with many things today, this need for agility has intensified and accelerated. So when I talk about Agile Office, it's both the physical space, like the dirt solution, and the Lease Economics. So we'll start with the physical. Build spaces that are multi-purpose. Don't build single-use spaces, because you need to design and build space so that it can adapt to these changing business environments with minimal capital, additional capital investments. And then think about it in terms of, can we use furniture to define our spaces instead of hard-built walls? When you're planning for your kitchen or your cafe in your space or in a flex spec office space, design it so that it can also host your team meetings or your client presentations so that it serves many purposes. Now, on the lease economics side, the goal is to structure the lease transaction so that it addresses the competing forces of the certainty the landlord wants and the flexibility that the tenant wants and needs. So in the transaction, acknowledge the uncertainty of today's business environments that the tenants are operating in. Offer shorter lease terms. There's options, relocation options, expansion options. Now, historically, real estate, the industry has not priced those options into the lease economic terms well. That's because the options cost the landlords, right? Both in a direct cost and a valuation cost, but they're valued by the tenants for their flexibility. So as you think about Agile Office, think about the pricing of the rent to address that flexibility. Can't have physical Agile office space without having the lease economics be Agile as well. So that's to borrow from the software developer terms.
Cool. Sorry, I messed around with the buttons in the background. You catch me off guard here. So so you've got the physical stuff in the physical space. How do we create things that work with COVID or post-COVID? You know, I don't know, how long do you think we live with this COVID stuff? Is it another 6 months or is it another 6 years? People are telling me, I bet we're still thinking about it 6 years from now, right? So we have to think in terms of the physical space. It has to be different, but it has to be able to evolve, right? So you and I were talking offline about a bigger landlord may be able to evolve, have their iterations because they're seeing multiple tenants go through it, and then you kind of learn as each tenant goes. And same with the lease economics, right? So now we've got lease economics. How do we make this all work? How do we make it agile? How do we make it flexible? But then the next question is, how in the heck do we get people to come back in the office?
Yeah, and it's a good question, right? Because I read a statistic over the weekend that 2/3 of office using employees are concerned about their safety when it comes to going back to an office. And we see that in the occupancy numbers today. Real estate owners expected to see 25% occupancy in their buildings by midsummer. It's less than 10%, and it'll be that way until we have a solution, an applied medical intervention. So when we do have that medical intervention and employees can make a choice about where they work that's not at home, maybe they'll go to an office, maybe they'll go to a coffee shop. The question is, why will they choose to go to the office? And there are two threshold issues. The first is office buildings need to meet the new standard for the wellness and the safety, address the number one issue head on, It's the new definition of a quality office building. There's intense focus on HVAC, on air quality, on touchless solutions, on prop tech solutions for mitigating traffic flow and occupancy issues. Think about elevators, right? How do you solve your elevators and how do you solve your parking garage, those friction areas? And once an office building, once owners meet that new definition, then they have to communicate it to their tenants. And they have to go from the tenant down to the individual employees, because those are the people who are making the decisions and concerned about their safety and the safety of others. So you just have to address it, fix it, and communicate it. And then the second is that office space needs to fit into the workplace mobility spectrum. Since employees can choose to work from anywhere, now in our future where we have applied medical intervention, what purpose will the office serve them? And really that depends on what type of work they're going to complete that day. Is it heads down concentration work? Is it client presentations, or is it a team meeting? And if an employee can't get the heads down quiet space at home, then they go to the office. And if they want to meet and collaborate with people in person, their team members, make it so they go to the office. We're back to the base premise that we started with, right? Landlords need to position their real estate to be a useful tool that helps companies achieve their goals, and so that employees choose to go there to do their work.
I hear you say that means different things to different people. So does this planning, does it involve the whole company or representatives of each group? Or maybe it's different by company, but how do we get at what do our employees need? How do we understand all that?
Yeah, it's a lot about communication, surveying, asking, right? With the first question is, you're getting your work done at home, but what are you missing? What do you want? What do you need? Why would you come back to an office building? And why would you not? Because if you can work from a coffee shop, or you can work from a co-working in your neighborhood, or you can go downtown to the HQ, why would you choose which one and when? And companies will give their employees options, right? You get to choose where you want to work in that given week or that day. So figure out why and what they need, and that's what the office offers.
Okay, and we got to talk about, is Agile really new? But I have to tell you, I geeked out over the weekend, and I pulled out a book on Agile development that I read 10 years ago. I don't know what I was thinking at that phase of my life, but I was really curious how this new form of development, and Sutherland, I think, is the guy who wrote it. But so then I looked up some of the terms, and I have to try to figure out, can we fit? So the software people, if there's anybody, I got to look and see how many people are online. So we've got people watching. If there's a software developer in there, they're probably their skin's crawling right now because we've stolen their terms. And so let's just see how well they fit. So there's the idea in Agile development called collective ownership. So that means that everybody on the team has ownership of the code and has the ability to change it. That sounds really scary to me, but can we apply that term to real estate?
So I think so. The way that strikes me is everybody has responsibility for the success of that experience in the office for all your teammates and for other people. So in today's world, that means if you're supposed to wear a mask when you're in the office, wear your mask, right? If you're walking through the lobby to go have a meeting or something and you're supposed to wear a mask or keep your distance, do that, because we are collectively working towards the success.
Right.
I think the other way to look at it is the industry itself can own the collective goal of providing more flexible space, meeting the demands for today's real estate needs by companies. Because if we don't, someone else will.
Okay, so then there's this idea of continuous deployment. So it's like the live application of new code. So if I type in new code on Thursday and it's live on Friday, do we have the ability to do that in an office environment?
I think so. Less in the built physical space if it's about a wall, but if it's about furniture creates your seating areas or creates your teaming, you can rearrange and reuse that as each team needs. So I see that as like, it's maybe an evolution or just a reuse. It's interesting. I'll have to think more about like deploying, because real estate is such a long cycle, right? The time from designing to signing up your contractor to actually delivering the space, measured in months or years. So it's hard to.
And that's the issue that software developers did when they came up with Agile development, is that they had these long Gantt charts. It was like, before you even saw what the product looked like, it could be 2 years. And then you get to that, and the stakeholders are going, that's not what I had in mind. Well, we wasted 2 years. And I can see where in real estate, we've had the same issue, right? We designed office space on paper, and we thought it was good. And then we built it out, and we're 3 months into our lease before we realized maybe this wasn't what we wanted. So I think that's kind of a cool concept that we can work out. Okay, iteration. So the idea of iteration in Agile development is that whether it's a week or a day or a month, there's iterations. And at the end of each one, you're building something that's complete. And at the beginning, you're looking at your to-do list that you haven't gotten to, and then you're kind of applying it in iteration types. Is there some way we can integrate that?
I think so. It's just about learning and applying your learning. And the learning, you're iterating from your successes and you're iterating from your failures, right? The most valuable information can be on what didn't work right or what you needed to tweak once you delivered it. And like we were talking about earlier, if you're a landlord or an owner that has a lot of scale, a lot of space, you can iterate on a much quicker time frame than a landlord that just has one building and maybe 3 spaces where they can have Agile space. But you can learn from all those other landlords, right? You can go check out their space. Your leasing team, your investment management team has access to figure out what's working and what's not.
That's where those big companies, Colliers and JLL and those folks have access to a lot of different iterations, right? They can kind of look at that. There's 2 more I want to do. One is I do not like it. So I hope the answer is no, we can't do this in real estate. But the whole idea of minimum viable product, to me, that's the whole reason why you have apps on your cell phone that crash and don't work the way they're supposed to, because the developers are trying to get it out in a minimum viable workable format so they can get real-time feedback and make changes, whereas the old model, right, with the long Gantt charts, develop the product, then you release it. It might be bug-free by the time you release it, but you don't have any idea that it wasn't what your customers wanted. So let's not do that in real estate. Are we okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
A half-finished office space, with no carpeting and folding chairs. I just feel like let's not do that. All right, last one I want to cover. This is new to me. I don't remember reading this in the book. But a Nico calendar, I may or may not be pronouncing that right, but it's charting team members or people's happiness or their mood. I'm sorry, not their happiness, but their mood throughout the process to try to establish patterns for things that don't work. Could we do something where we're on an iteration, we've rearranged our common area, and we start to keep track of how people use it?
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I know that there's prop tech solutions for that, right? By how many people go to a space, how long they spend in a space, if they're proximate to their colleagues. So there's technology that can help do that. But people could also self-report, right? I like this, I don't like this, or I would do this. And if there's a common area space or a furniture setup that people avoid, it's always the last to be used. That's a big clue.
Right. Yes. No one's going there. I love this. So in case you can't tell, I love the Agile Office idea, and I had fun kind of putting these together. But let's talk. You had a comment or a question. Is Agile Office really a new concept? So can you address that for us?
Sure. So the need for flexibility in lease terms and in flexible space has been around for a long time. And tenants have solved it. They've solved it in many different ways. One way is with the co-working companies, right? You mentioned WeWork earlier. They're the brand name for how to solve flexible office use and flexible lease terms. Landlords have also provided this directly, right? Hines, I give my heartfelt thank you to Mr. Hines and my sympathies to his friends and family, because his impact on the industry is immense.
Amazing. Amazing.
And they've led the way. They've partnered with Convene and Industrious to provide direct product, like WashREIT has too with their Space Plus platform. And then real estate companies have helped tenants solve this by CBRE's HANA is one example. And then for a long time, and I think it'll continue, tenants have been able to solve this by taking sublease space or encumbered space. It's cheaper, it's already built out, and it's shorter term. But what's different now is that the demand for Agile office space has increased significantly. So in JLL's report from this summer about flexible office space, they note that 67% of commercial real estate decision makers are increasing their workplace mobility strategies or their programs. And flexible space is the central element in their Agile work strategies. So 2/3 are focused on Agile office. So the landlords are figuring out how can they meet this demand. They have a couple of headwinds, right? If you don't have this skill set on your team already, landlords are figuring out how to build it or find it, because it's a new way of doing business for many. And the second is the valuation impacts. The traditional 10-year DCF valuation struggles with appropriately valuing Agile office leasing. Now, you mentioned REITs earlier. So owners with capital structures that value cash flow or cash flow growth, like publicly traded REITs, and like many privately held companies and the corporate-owned real estate, they're in the pole position right now to meet this wave of demand. I don't know that competitive advantage will last that long, because with such demand already here and more coming, other real estate owners will get their ducks in a row to meet the demand.
Yeah, I think it's a race. Maybe not a race. It's a learning curve and a race. Fun if you're you, right? Because you get to experiment and think of ideas and help your clients come up with new ways to solve for X. And like you said at the beginning, you're a problem solver. I saw that right away, and you're like, let me come up with ways to fix this for you. It's cool. But there will be haves and have-nots. I think about back to my early days in real estate. As a private equity firm, we bought a couple office buildings. One we bought with a really sophisticated partner, and that went really well running it, right? They knew what they were doing. We bought one on our own, and it was a learning curve to adjust to just doing a simple build out. I was just out of law school. I didn't have any idea how to handle that. And so we had to rely on other people. So I think you're right. The REITs and the haves are going to get at this faster. And the big brokerage firms, don't you think? Be able to kind of develop this. And I think people need to call somebody like you, Mandi. We need help being agile, because what the old system, the old law firm window seat just doesn't work anymore. We need things that can adapt and change and refocus. I think it's really cool. We're going to get back to that, but as part of this new show, so for background for everybody, I'm not tired of webinars, but I'm kind of tired of webinars. And they're the same format, and I've got one on Wednesday. It's going to be great, and I think I've got 4 a week for the next 5 or 6 weeks, and they're really compelling and interesting, but we don't get to do fun stuff. So I said, when we do this show, we're going to do fun stuff. So you and I are going to play 2 truths and a lie. All right? I'm going to go first. Okay. So I'll say 3 things about me, and you got to pick out which one's a lie. If you're watching this on YouTube, I got to bring up the YouTube live stream. You can type in here in our YouTube live stream next to that, and you can guess as well. So go ahead and do that. But here's mine. First one. I coach college lacrosse in my spare time. That's one. I once wasted $50,000 creating an iPhone app. That's 2. 3, I only sleep 5 to 6 hours a night.
Okay. I'm going to say that you sleep more than 5 to 6 hours a night, hopefully.
That's crazy. So my wife sleeps 5 to 6 hours. You nailed that one. Most people don't want to believe that I wasted $50,000. I could have bought a cool, like a Tesla or something, instead of spending every morning talking to people in India. But yeah, I'm an 8 to 9 hour sleep person. I don't know. I've always been that way. I wish I wasn't. I'd get a lot more done. But That's the way it is. Well, you're up.
Okay. So, number 1, I drive a Chevy Volt. Number 2, I studied Mandarin and forensic anthropology at University of Hawaii, Manoa. And number 3, the first car that I purchased only drove in reverse.
Okay, I have to. Don't say anything. Don't smile because you'll give it away. How can I not pick number 3? I could. You live in D.C., so let's see. You live in inner ring suburban D.C., right? So you have to have a car. You're not riding the metro everywhere, especially if you want to get to, like, was it Golden Triangle where all those restaurants are? Yeah, yep. You got to get down there. But a Volt would be a good car for that. Yeah, how does a car only go in reverse? I gotta pick number 3.
Okay. Well, so the other thing to know about me is I grew up in Alaska. So I bought my first car and it only drove in reverse, and I traded a 3-wheeler for a transmission that had both drive and reverse, and that was my first car.
That's amazing. That's ingenuity. So I got to hand it to you. My daughter, who bought a 1973 pickup, isn't alone. You just said, hey, it's mechanical. Well, we'll fix this. Cool.
Doable.
Well, good for you. Alaska. Okay, here's my next 3. Number 1, I prefer to drive a conversion van or an RV to any other vehicle. Number 2, I married my high school sweetheart. Number 3, I used to be a CPA, attorney, investment banker, and real estate broker all at the same time, and spent like a month out of the year in continuing education.
Okay. So let's see. You're number 2. You married your high school sweetheart. I did too. So I'm going to say that that's truth. So I'm going to say you don't prefer to drive a conversion van or an RV everywhere.
Yay, I got one. I win. I love. We bought our first conversion van when we got our first St. Bernard and had kids, and it just fits more stuff. And I kind of got used to the man van thing. And once I got over the stigma, and people stare at me when I get out, they're like, "What are you doing?" And my next buy is an RV to go watch my kids play lacrosse. I didn't marry my high school sweetheart. There's a really funny story there, and everybody that works with me is now watching and probably thinks that I did because we went to high school 15 miles from each other. But I was in the 80s. I was in a hair band during when hair bands were popular. I want to make that caveat. And I was kind of the nerdy kid, so I just stood in the back and played guitar, and the other people were the good-looking people in the band. And my wife came to one of our shows with her friend and had a crush on our drummer. So we sort of met in high school and kind of knew each other, but she didn't think I was very good looking and she liked somebody else better. So I lucked out in the end and sort of married somebody I knew from high school. All right, you got last one. You're going to do first job version, and then we can wrap that up.
Sure. Okay. So number 1, I mowed lawns. Number 2, cleaned motel rooms. Number 3, sold donuts and coffee at the state fair.
Alaska State Fair?
Yeah.
See, I was baiting you because if you said yes, then I knew that one's true. I'm going to say that I'm going to say you'd never clean motel rooms.
I did clean motel rooms and tons of them, but I didn't mow lawns because not many Alaskans where I grew up had lawns.
Oh, that's a good point because you're riding the 3-wheelers over the top. All right. Okay. Back to real life. Agile office, a really cool new way to kind of look at this thing. It's maybe not 100% new, but Mandi, I love your take on it. There's an article in RE Journals that we published that you wrote. I think everybody needs to follow this closely. You're a consultant, so people can hire you directly. You don't have to go to JLL or Colliers or someplace like that. You can, I'm sure. But if you get a hold of Mandi, you can and you work with landlords or tenants?
All of the above.
Cool. So we got about a minute left. What's the takeaway you want people to take away from Agile Office? What do you want them to go home with?
So the takeaway is it's here, it's now, get on board. Don't shy away from it. Figure out how you're going to do it. Go get the right team so that you can win, because the demand is significant. And like we noted earlier, REITs are suffering from cash flow issues because things are changing, right? We're in that transition period. So get in front of this wave of demand.
Love it. So hopefully you're watching live right now. I see we got a good sized group, or you can watch it online after. We're always on our YouTube channel. RE Journals Webinars is our YouTube channel. And we'll see you at the next episode of Power 30. Next week, I've got Casey Hancock. She is African-American, or she's biracial, in Houston, Texas. And she's the most powerful speaker I think I've ever listened to. And it doesn't hurt that she's 6'1", and she said 6'4" in heels. So that helps. But you'll love her. So log in next week. We'll see you all later. Thanks again, Mandi. Couldn't thank you enough. Great conversation. Go